Hello. This is a new thing for me, so bear with us. I am Sean, and I'm the saint.
And I am Andy, and I am so tired of stupid weather, and I am the singer.
Yes. It's like 3 weeks now.
Uh, is it 3 weeks well, we're working on 4 weeks, aren't we?
Yes, this was the third
No,
win. Well, so
next
you were
week's
gone
four.
two
Yeah.
weeks ago because of your son graduated from boot camp or something, lame like that.
Yep. Boot
But
camp. Yeah. Some
last week and today,
lameo military crap, and then
yeah.
I,
But this Wednesday and
I
last
don't know.
Wednesday
We
was
probably
because
could
of
have done
weather.
church both days.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we probably could have gone to church both days. Actually, maybe not today.
No, today
But
I wouldn't have
yeah,
I wouldn't have pushed it. Last Wednesday we could have done it, but
I'm
the rule is if the schools are out, we are out. So,
yep. But I'm missing my peeps. The only time I've seen my peeps in the last 3 weeks was for a funeral.
but that funeral felt a
And
lot
that's
like
no
church.
fun.
But it felt a lot like church.
That funeral, I
That
mean,
was a celebration of
it's
life.
weird to say that you had an awesome funeral, but that was an awesome funeral.
It really was.
It was about perfect.
That's why I didn't feel too bad
Sure
about missing
was.
church on
So,
Sunday because of that.
nah, no, it was definitely up there. Well, so we are recording now. Is this week 5 of the Bible recap?
And we're technically we got 5, 6, and 7
Yes.
to do.
5, 6, and 7. So are we going to do all three of those weeks in one fell swoop, or are we going to do three separate episodes, or just one
Well, the question
mega
is, do we want to do
episode?
27 questions at once? Is the real option there?
I don't know. I guess we see how it goes, don't we?
Yeah.
Well, usually I am the fool holding the green book and asking all the questions, but I left my green book at the church, which we are not at. So
I have my wife's
you're in
copy,
charge,
so
buddy.
she actually already has the answers in here for some of it, so I could, you just steal her answers too.
What?
I won't, but she has some good answers though.
Oh, you should. I
Yeah.
was gonna say she probably has better answers than we'll have. Now I gotta fix my hair after fixing it. There we go. All right, hit us.
All right. So we're going way back to Genesis in this one. So for those that don't know, in the Bible recap, we are actually reading almost the finishing Leviticus. So we're a few books behind here. Okay. What do you think God is demonstrating by repeatedly foregoing the societal norm of primogeniture, where the oldest son gets the blessing? Does this seem fair? Why or why not? So we're going back to the idea of
Hmm.
Jacob taking the birthright from Esau, Seth taking the birthright from Cain, Joseph taking the main birthright from all of his siblings. So,
Did you say Isaac as well? Of course, Isaac didn't take it; he was just given it. But
yes, but Isaac would be another example of Ishmael too, yes. So we're the oldest.
um,
So they're going, and he keeps flipping the
I
idea of the lesser becoming over the older.
right. He's messing with the order of things as they are in the world, and for me, it kind of like points forward to Jesus, I guess, because
Mhm.
if you think about even in the parable of the lost son, the older brother is the one who's mad that the younger brother gets his birthright and runs off and squanders it, yet comes back home to be with the father, and the father accepts him. And so, all throughout all of those stories, it's like God's doing all of this stuff to upend the birthright order, but then also makes it right in the end by giving up his first son, his only
Yeah.
son, but
Yep.
his firstborn. So, what does all that mean? I don't know,
Well,
but
I think
it's
one thing
pretty
that's
interesting.
important. I think one thing that's important is that God goes beyond our cultural norms. So what we think is right as a
Yep.
culture may or may not be what God thinks is right. And so I think he's always taking and flipping the expectations, especially when they're based off of worldly wisdom, and turning it on its head. And so I think he did this repeatedly by having the younger ones rescue the older ones in many cases, or the younger ones
you
being,
look at David as well.
yeah. And some of it was the younger ones that were more righteous. So there's also that. So I guess what he's saying is it doesn't matter your legal birthright. It's what is your heart. That's really what it comes down to.
Yeah. Which is still a little weird when you think about some of those people didn't have the best of hearts.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
But they didn't have the best of hearts,
but I'm not sure I understand where it's going.
They didn't have the best of hearts, but they were the ones that were willing to repent. You think of Jacob.
Right.
Yeah, Jacob was a deceiver.
It ended up for good in the end.
But Esau's the one that married all the Canaanite women just because he wanted to scorn his parents. It's like, well, hey, if I'm gonna screw up my parents, mess up my parents, and make them unhappy with me, well, I'm just gonna go all in then, and I'll find a third wife or whatever. So, I mean,
I'll show them.
Cain is the one that killed his other brother, so there's that. Because because God liked his brothers, sacrifice more. So, I would say that if you look at it, the the brothers that were skipped had a lot more issues than the ones that were given. Okay, so think, for example, Judah and Reuben. Okay, Reuben is the oldest, Judah's the fourth, and Judah's horrible. Don't get me wrong. The first, several chapters that we see Judah, he's awful.
Yeah.
He's the one that wants to kill Joseph. He's the one that ends up selling him to the Midianites. But it's Judah changes, who has a humbling experience with his, daughter-in-law. We'll just put it that way. And he then becomes a completely different person, and he's the one that gets the best blessing. He's the one that gets the blessing that you're going to rule. You're going to have kings that come out of your line, not Reuben and Simeon and Levi.
Would we say eventually the Messiah?
That would be the Lion of Judah. Yes. Yep. So. And the other one that gets a similar blessing is actually Joseph's youngest son. Out of the two sons that Joseph has, you have Manasseh, which is the older son, and then you have Ephraim. It's Ephraim that gets the blessing that he will also have kings out of his line, which, when you see he becomes the northern kingdom of Israel, he's the one that is a king of that. So.
Right.
So. Over and over, we see this theme.
So God just does whatever he wants to do.
Yeah, but I think there is a purpose for this, and I think maybe in some ways it does point all the way up to Christ, that God gives his firstborn for all of the secondborns to elevate us to a level of glory that we would not be able to achieve on our own.
I mean, you can think of it as the Jews and the Gentiles. The Gentiles are sort of the second born, and they're elevated after Christ's, after his coming back, and then after his resurrection. And then, I mean, you could just take that on down the line to the Pharisees being the sort of the older brothers, and they're being passed over for the new brothers, and and the Jews being passed over. Not passed over, but kind of passed over for the Gentiles.
Set aside unless they're willing to.
That's probably how they perceived it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's kind of how they perceived it. That's not necessarily what he did, but that was their perception.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. What's your wife?
Their laws and everything like that was set aside. Right. So.
Yeah.
All right. So shall we go with number 2? Do what?
Yep.
Okay.
I said, is that what Megan had for her answer?
No, Megan's actually was good. She said, to repent and put off the old sin nature, put on the true spiritual nature. So she even took it in a different spiritual way of looking at
Smart way.
it.
She's so thinking smart.
All right, so number 2,
Okay,
recalling
what's number
Abraham's
2?
lies about Sarah and Isaac's lie about Rebekah. How are the lies of the Hebrew midwives different? What does this reveal about God? Okay, so we're in Exodus now, and so I guess technically this is all kind of moving towards this is Exodus is that week. So
Yep.
we have Isaac and we have Abraham that both lie about their wives being their sisters. Now, Abraham told a half lie because she was his half sister. Isaac told a full lie. Is that your product placement?
I'm trying.
Maybe they'll see it and they'll throw us $5 and some pocket lint.
Oh yeah, with our huge viewership, they will definitely see
Yes.
that.
But then we move on. So the question is referring to in Exodus, when we see the very first chapter, we're talking about the slaves, and Pharaoh tells the midwives to kill the baby boys. And they proceed to lie about it, say, well, we just couldn't get there fast enough. These Hebrew women are so healthy, they just pop them out without us getting there. So is this lie differently? And what does this reveal about God?
Well, for me, it's different because Abraham's lie was more self-focused and selfish,
Yep.
whereas the lie of the midwives was more selfless and for preservation of an entire people at some point, right? So it's more like I don't know. I guess it comes down to that thing where we have to weigh the outcome of the lie and whether it's good or bad, I guess, which we really shouldn't be lying at all. But, it kind of reminds me of, people hiding Jews in the attics in the
Sure.
basement of their house in the 30s and 40s. I mean, obviously you would be justified in lying to the Nazis and saying, nope, no Jews here, sorry, to save those lives. Whereas, you know, Abraham's lie and Isaac's lie were both more self preservation, I guess.
And I agree completely with you. I would go one step further, saying though that where there, and I know it's asking what's different, but there is a similarity, I think, in both of these lies. It's a lack of trust in God. So, could
Mm,
God, even if they
yep,
had told the truth, could God have rescued those baby boys? Absolutely. We see that in what comes
absolutely.
up,
Yep.
40 years later when he, brings 10 plagues and he splits the sea and then kills
Right.
Pharaoh. So there is still I think, a slight lack of
Exactly.
trust, but their motivation is different. Like you said, Abraham and Isaac's is,
Yeah.
self-preservation, whereas the midwives are doing this for altruistic reasons. I think that God can use sin in our lives to still bring about His glory. And I think about this in a situation of somebody that goes to prison for a crime they commit. Okay, they're going to deal with the consequences of that. But can God use that? Absolutely. David
Yep.
Berkowitz was a serial killer who found God, who found Jesus in prison, and his whole life was changed because of that. So God can use the sin to bring about His glory. And I think in this situation, He uses their sin to bring about the glory by having Moses preserved to become his hands and feet, because he won't be his mouth, but at least his hands and his feet to
Yep.
lead his people
Yeah,
out.
for sure. Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that.
So, all right.
But don't lie, kids.
The truth may be harder, but it's definitely more rewarding. I tell my kids
Well,
all the
the
time, you're
truth is a
only as
lot
good as your
easier to
word.
remember too.
Yeah, that's true. You got to try to remember all the
Yep.
facts.
Yeah, absolutely. from a practical standpoint, it's also easier to remember the truth than it is what lies you've told.
True.
Remember your story. So,
All right.
but, yeah, don't lie, kids.
Don't lie, kids. Number 3, God shows up to Moses and gives him an assignment after he had murdered someone. How would you feel if your pastor or boss had murdered someone before they became your leader? How do you think that incident would impact them and their view on their ability to lead? I want to go on record first off. I have never
I
murdered
would have
anyone
questions.
physically. I've had hate in my heart though.
Oh, sure. Well, then you might as well have done it, right?
Yep.
According to Jesus. I would have questions.
So I think about a church
That's
that
such
I
a
know.
weird question.
It is, but but here's the thing though. I actually can kind of think of a real world experience of this. There was a church in another town not too far from here that is the pastor is a former drug dealer. And he's got tattoos all over, and some of them are pretty bold tattoos, but he found God, he found Jesus, and it changed his life. And one of his ministries is one of the most powerful ministries I have ever seen and witnessed. And to see the people that he is reaching, that I, having not been in those kind of shoes, would not be able to reach the same level. He is able to do that. I would say that,
It reminds me of the guy from. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, it reminds me of the guy in Colorado Springs that we met.
Yes.
Who was the mob enforcer and drug addict and sex addict and everything else, and how he's now was he a pastor, a co-pastor?
I'd say he was at least ministry. I don't think he was officially the pastor. The other guy was the pastor, but he's definitely a lay speaker and servant. But so I think that God can use broken people. Yeah, he has a story. Well, Paul was another example.
That leads. Yeah. Yeah, and that really reveals his power to change people too. If it was a perfect person who'd never done any wrong being up there, you wouldn't see the power of God's ability to transform lives. You would just see a guy up there who's better than the rest of us telling us what to do. So, I think from that perspective, it's almost more powerful to have a guy who has a story like that telling you about how God's changed his life than, just the average ordinary person who hasn't really undergone anything like that.
Yeah, I think that both testimonies can reach different situations, and God can definitely use all of this. So I don't think that I don't think that just because Moses had made some seriously bad choices, even though his murder was in the defense of somebody else,
right.
Paul was a murderer also, and yet we see the transformation of Saul to Paul, and 14 books of the Bible are written from him, and letters. So God is always using, God has always been using the ones that have had, that have made a complete change. I was going to say earlier, Matthew, the tax collector, he would have the ability to reach people that, Philip would not be able to reach. And Philip would reach people that Matthew would have trouble with. And that's okay. Same way with Simon the Zealot would be another example. He's going to reach different people than Simon Peter. So,
yeah,
there's no one that God cannot use.
It takes all kinds.
I am saying that. Right. And the truth is, I think this is important for a person, and I hope that this is what they get from the scriptures, is that you don't have to be perfect to come to God. He expects you to come to him wherever you're at in your imperfection. And then through sanctification and justification, he will make you perfect, and glorification.
Yep.
At glorification.
Yep. We keep saying things like, You can come as you are, but he loves you too much to leave you where you are. That's
Yeah.
kind of the same
As our
same sort
sticker
of thing.
says, just come as you are. You can change inside.
Change inside. Yep, that's a good sticker.
It is a good sticker. Yeah. I borrowed a
Available
phrase
at
from another church.
Connection Point Church for $1.
Yeah.
Sorry, what?
I said I borrowed that phrase from another church sign on the way to worship one day, but that's okay. Okay. Whew, this next one's gonna be a tough one. In Exodus
Okay.
4:21 and chapter 7:3, God warns Moses about what will happen when he speaks to Pharaoh. God will harden Pharaoh's heart. These are
Mm.
hard verses to wrestle with, but try to think through some of the implications together. If God did this, was it fair? Why or why not? What does Pharaoh deserve? And it's okay to wrestle with this question internally if you choose to discuss. Okay. So God tells Moses, I'm going to harden his heart. Process.
The way I see it, Pharaoh's heart was already hardened. He was already abusing and misusing the Jews. Or the Hebrews, I guess at that point, Israelites. What would they be called?
Either one will
He
work.
was already abusing them to the near point of death anyway, and I think the point of all that was to show that he is in control of everything. Because if they had just walked in and said, "Hey, let our people go," and he'd said, "Oh, okay, see you later," um, I don't think I don't really know that the people would have accepted that or would have, you think about how many times they failed in the wilderness and beyond after they left there. If they hadn't seen as much as they had seen from God, they definitely, I think, would have turned back and gone to Egypt. And of course, they wanted to several times. But, I think that, there's the story of, every time Moses does one of his miracles, then the magicians from Egypt could basically do the same thing. So at some point, God is play. It's going to sound weird, but kind of playing this game of one-upsmanship against these guys to show that He actually has power. And one of the things I like about this, if you really think about it, is it's a decreation game. So I think, if I remember correctly, the first set of miracles are basically the creation story backwards. If you think about the land animals, it's almost like you're reading the animals that God created backwards, but He's using them to decreate Egypt. That's a Bible project assertion, not my own
Yeah,
assertion.
it's going back to darkness as being being the last
Yeah,
before
works its way
Passover.
back to darkness. The water's messed up. The fish, the animals. It's like the reverse order of creation.
Well, and another thing that's important to
Um,
note is that each one of those is an exact attack on a specific Egyptian god.
God. Yep. Yeah. So there's all this stuff here where God is asserting His dominance over the gods, and the Pharaoh thinks he's also descended from or a god. So I don't know. I almost think of it kind of like the same way we think about the flood. Like God knew where all this was headed, and He just chose to put his finger on it and speed it up to a point where He could start over. And with Pharaoh, I kind of take the same tack to it of He knew everything Pharaoh was going to do. He just kind of amplified it in order to show his dominance and his power.
I will
That's
go.
all I'm going to think about that.
Yeah, I'm going to go a little bit more to that too, though, because the first four or five of the plagues, it says that Pharaoh hardened his heart, and then it's at the end,
Right.
the last half, that God hardens his heart. And I think what he was doing at that
Yeah.
point was, Pharaoh, you had your chances, you kept choosing to disobey, kept choosing to
Yeah.
reject me. So now I'm going to let you experience the full travesty of what you're doing. And I'm going to use this to bring myself glory and my people glory.
Yep.
So
Seems
yeah,
like that's kind of a
God does
recurring
harden his
story too.
heart, but God also understands that these are people that are dealing with, extreme travesties, extreme
Yeah.
idolatry, extreme, sexual immorality, extreme pagan worship, extreme, brutality. Not really any different than the Canaanites that they're going to go and supplant also here later on through Judges. You
Yep.
know, it's the same thing. So God is setting his people apart, and he's going to reveal his presence over and over and over. And you know, I think it is fair because God knew Pharaoh's heart. And the
Yeah.
hard part is the
Yeah.
hard part is go ahead.
No, I was going to say I agree. I don't really feel like it's unfair. I think I could see how someone might view it as unfair, but
Sure.
um, I think God had the insight into Pharaoh's heart to know exactly what he was doing.
Yeah. What gets really where it gets really hard is the firstborn son. Did he deserve to die?
Hmm.
That's where I think people start to have a wrestle with this one, because you're thinking, well, what did that kid do? Well, the truth is, though, that kid may have been 22 years old, living in daddy's house, and was doing just as much depravity as everybody else, and just as much idol
Yeah.
worship. We automatically assume it's going to be a little cute little
A
6-year-old, but
child.
it
Yeah.
doesn't say it. This is, and in some of the houses, it was children, yes, but again, it's still in a culture that abhors the creator of the universe. So,
Yeah.
all right, that was a tough one. All right, so the
That's enough of
Israelites,
that.
remember, huh? Do it.
I said, that's enough of that.
There's a delay, and so it messes with me a little bit.
Yeah.
Number 5, the Israelites don't believe God's promise because of their broken spirits and harsh circumstances. Can you relate? How has God proven himself to be kinder than you had the faith to believe or hope for? Mhm.
Uh, Part A, of course not. And
Never.
B, every day, all the time, every day.
I would say that just the fact that we started a new church and we made some pretty tough calls. At times we doubted, like, is this really going to work? Are we going to, completely mess this up? And God's like, I got this. I got you.
Yeah.
Chill out, take a deep breath, and just trust. But I think
Yeah.
that,
I think my. Go
go ahead.
ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, I just think my entire life is a series of that, of doubting, and then God showing me that, there's zero reason for you to doubt me, and I'm hoping by the time I'm 50 or so that'll no I'll have that flushed out of my system.
I figured by
We're
75
pretty
or
close.
80, when we're on our deathbed, on a
Uh,
breathing machine, then we'll figure it out.
I don't know, man. I feel like I'm getting pretty close.
Well, that's
I
good.
still have my days, but I feel pretty close to feeling like I fully trust in him. I don't fully trust in me, and I don't fully trust in most of the people around me, including you at times, of course, because you're a human being.
I
But
will fail you.
um, I am to the point where I almost feel like I know that the mistrust I've had of God has been way misplaced, and that He has been way better to me than I could ever have deserved, and if I had to live for eternity. So, yeah, I don't know. I definitely see where it's easy to do that. It's been easy for me to doubt God, especially in, harder circumstances. But, it's like we tell our kids all the time that the the trust comes with experience, kind of.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's easy when you're 12 to 15 to 16, 17, 18 to not have as much trust in God because you haven't had the experience of him pulling you through all of these tough times and having him bring people along beside you to pull you that direction, and bringing people into your lives that change it in such dramatic ways that you'll never be the same again. So the more of that you experience, the easier it is to trust that he's going to see you through because you have that experience. And would it probably be more valuable if you didn't have that experience yet you still trusted him fully? Obviously, but I don't know that that's a realistic expectation for a human being.
Right. Yeah, I think the more I read Exodus, the more I can relate to the Israelites. As a kid, I used to think, "Oh, come on, you guys are so stupid. You're following a flaming, cloud, and you still want to go make a graven calf." But the more I gain wisdom as an adult, the more I realize, we're pretty much the Israelites over and over again.
We're pretty dumb.
We're
We like to
sheeple.
think we're smarter than them, but we're still pretty dumb.
Yes. Yeah, we tend to follow the flock, and usually the flock takes us right off a cliff.
The difference is obviously we don't get the pillar of fire and the cloud and all that good stuff, but we also don't make, for the most part, we also don't make physical idols much anymore. It's all in our hearts. So it's just as easy as it was to do then, but it's, for me, I think it's sometimes harder to recognize, um, because it's not a tangible
Yeah.
hard thing like a golden calf you can hold in your hands. It's money, or it's politics, or it's a person, or it's all of these other sort of not necessarily not non tangible things, but not as tangible things.
It's not a statue inside your house that you go and bow down to,
Right.
3 times a day or
Right.
whatever, and light some candles.
But it may be the phone you carry around
Yeah,
18 out of 24 days or
or it
hours a
may be
day.
the sport that you follow, the sports team, or it may be the musician or whatever, or it may
Yep.
be the social media. There's a lot of idols that we have. Satan's gotten
It is
pretty
absolutely
crafty.
all of that.
Yeah.
Yep. It is absolutely all of that.
So the moral of the story is we are the Israelites wandering in the wilderness. But the
Yep.
difference is that we have the Holy Spirit as believers that we can tap into that they did not have. They had the presence of God, in the tabernacle. We have the presence of God within our hearts. So the
Yep.
closeness is, infinitely greater, than what they experienced even.
Hallelujah.
Yes. All right. Number 6. What can we learn from God's distinct treatment of the Israelites who doubt him, the Egyptian servants who fear him, and the Egyptians who don't fear him? All right, I will answer. I can give an answer to this one. The first thing
Okay.
is that God doesn't care your background as much as he cares about your willingness to submit to him. So the Israelites that submitted were elevated. The ones that did not were excommunicated or killed or whatever. With the Egyptian
Yep.
servants that found favor, and were willing to serve the Lord, they were also elevated. And the Egyptians that chose to scorn God, they had to deal with the consequences. They were the ones that lost their firstborn. They're the ones that ended up diving right into the sea and having it cave in on them. So, but I
Yeah, I
mean,
was going to
over and over
say
we see
God
this.
is not a respecter of persons.
Yeah. But we think of Ruth as a later example that we're going to have. We have Rahab as another example. Over and over. Moses' wife Zipporah was a Midianite. We're going to see this over and over.
Yep.
That there were other people groups that would still serve the Lord, and whilst they were not his chosen people that he had set apart specifically to set about his Messiah, the coming Messiah, he still, favored them, blessed them, walked with them,
Right.
and still used that and allowed that to have a relationship with them. So,
yeah, it's kind of a preview of the coming Messiah, is it not?
it is, yeah. The Messiah that came first to the Jews, but also knew that there would be the Gentiles that he would be coming to also. So, I think the important thing is that he keeps his promises. So he's going to do what he says he's going to do.
Yep.
All right, now we're on to the Passover. This is a good one. This one could be. I don't know if we're gonna get through any more than just today's, honestly.
Yeah,
Anyway, all right.
fine.
So number 7.
We can get together other nights this week and just
We can
bang them out.
I'm sure there'll be lots of snow. Much like Christians look back to the resurrection of Christ for hope, Jewish people throughout history have looked back to the Exodus and to Passover for hope. Just as Christians celebrate Easter annually, Jews celebrate Passover annually. In fact, the timeline for the annual events overlaps. And it encourages us to read 1 Corinthians 5:7 and Mark 14:1 aloud. But I'll just shorten it up to say that Jesus' Last Supper was a Passover meal. Just before,
Yep.
and that happened the night before he goes to the cross. In the Passover story, how do we see God setting the stage for his people to understand the significance of Jesus' death? I did a whole sermon on this just a couple weeks ago. So,
yeah, you did. Well, I mean, the obvious one is that Jesus is the Passover lamb whose blood saves all those who believe. Other than that,
well, okay, so that's a part of it, but you think about this, that the Passover lamb allows the angel of death to pass you by.
The Passover.
And so that means that you are being shielded from death. And when we think about that from a perspective of Christ offers us eternal life, which means that death no longer has the same sting. We just celebrated a beautiful life,
Right.
long lived, a week ago or last weekend. And we know that our dear sister Vicky is alive with Christ. Her physical body is buried, in the ground, but we know that her spirit is alive. So Jesus is the sacrificial substitutionary atonement for our sins. And the idea of that lamb goes all the way back to the Garden of Eden. Anytime there is sin, blood has to be spilt to overcome it. Adam and Eve, they fall, and God has to then go and make them clothing by killing an animal. Specifically points out he slaughtered an animal. He was using that animal's blood to overcome and to cover their sins as he was covering their nakedness. And so there's a lot of all that, and then it flashes forward. That same theme is all the way here to now. Again, once more,
and everything else.
Yeah. That's the beauty of the Mosaic law, is how it sets up Christ in so many ways, because it is really
Yep.
preparing him to be the Lamb of God, to be the final sacrifice, and to be the tabernacle, which we'll talk about here probably a little bit. So it's all about deliverance. And the other thing is that
Absolutely.
when we do communion at our church, we are acknowledging that we are doing a little part of the Passover feast. We are taking the bread,
Yep.
which was a specific part of the Seder feast. There were 3 pieces of bread, or 3 crackers, or flat, unleavened breads, and the middle one represents the Messiah. It's the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. They're wrapped up. Jesus takes that one and he breaks it, saying, "This is my body broken for you." Then he would take one of the cups, and there were 4 cups of juice or wine that are drank in a traditional Passover. One of them is the cup of redemption, and he takes that and it
Redemption.
says, "This is my blood spilt for you." So every time we take communion, we are remembering the Passover.
Yep.
And I think
That's
in our
pretty
Western
cool.
culture we
We do
forget
that.
that.
Yeah, and that's why I love what we've been doing the last few years. Even before we started this church,
Yeah,
was with the youth, we've had the Seder meal pretty much every year for the last, I don't
I don't
know,
know, 8
how many
years.
is it now? 7,
I,
8 years.
I think I started it when I
And
first got there. So
yeah, that's been one of my favorite things to do at Easter time for Passover, is um, to do that together, and to realize the symbolism and what Jesus was doing, because it's just it's so much like everything else. When we read the Bible, we're reading it through our modern lens, and we go, "Oh, he broke some bread. Oh,
right,
yep, this is my body. Oh, yeah." And then we drank some wine, and then, "Oh, yeah, that's my blood." And obviously that's the culmination of the thing, right? He's making that comparison, that like all of this thing that you've been doing since Egypt has been pointing to this moment right here, right?
right.
But we don't understand the context of the meal itself. Before I met you, no one in my life has ever explained to me the cup of redemption, or the Seder feast at all. We
Sure.
just know they met at Passover, had the deal, and then we ignore everything that went on before that from now on. So I think it's a beautiful picture of what Jesus was doing there, and I think it's made more beautiful by understanding the Jewish tradition behind all of that, as it points directly to Jesus. And I just still say that if you've never experienced it, you should experience it, and it will change the way you look at communion.
Yep. And I think that's, for me, I know it's definitely made me look at Exodus in a much deeper
Mm.
light. As a kid, I was all about the New Testament. I mean, I remember some of the Old Testament stories, and they were all
Yep.
fun. Nothing like calling out some mama bears to maul 40 kids. But the reality is, it was like, if I'm going to focus on something, I'm going to focus on the New Testament. That I felt that was more applicable, or more important for me as a believer to focus on. But as I've gotten older and I've matured and my faith has grown deeper, I recognize that Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, there is so much truth there that completely points to the Messiah. And that when
Yeah.
you understand that, it makes Revelation so much more important when you can see it through the lens of Genesis and Exodus, because
Yeah.
because it
For
really is
me,
a return to that. Go ahead. So,
yeah. And for me, it just, I don't know, it bol it bolsters the logical truth of Jesus being who he
mhm.
says he is.
Yeah,
Not only does this guy just show up out of the blue and he's this brand new thing and he freaks everybody out, the further you go back into this and then you see it all points to him, strengthens that foundation. I do feel like, and I've probably said this a couple of times before, if all you ever read was the New Testament or the four Gospels, and you understood what Jesus was trying to tell you, you could make it through this thing and end up, I think, with um, a new body for eternity in
Sure.
the New Jerusalem. But I think in order for you to have a sustained faith, even through, as we were talking about earlier, some of the trials and tribulations and the things you don't understand, and the world gets to you, and you can get easily distracted, or you can trade that for something you feel more deeply about. I think it's more difficult to do that after you have seen all of the other things 400, 700, 1300, 2200 years before Jesus ever steps onto the scene. All of that points directly to him, and then
Right.
he's fulfilling that thing on his last night on earth. And um I think having that as a background to the New Testament offers up more evidence for those that need it, and it also offers up a strength in the foundation that I don't know that you would get if you didn't know the backstory.
Yeah.
I still think it's perfectly fine to think that you don't need the Old Testament in order for you to be justified and sanctified. If you want to believe that, that's fine. I'm going to disagree with you, but we'll probably be shaking hands in heaven if
Yeah.
that's the only difference, right? But I think your faith can be much stronger having known the backstory
Yeah.
and everything that points to it.
Yeah, and I would take it even one step further, that your sanctification is going to be deeper
Mm-hmm.
in many cases once you start to understand, because the truth is the scriptures that Jesus used is our Old Testament.
Yeah,
He's taking his stories,
he
he
wasn't
is
quoting
taking
New
his
Testament.
yeah, there wasn't, I mean, the New Testament isn't written yet when when we have Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. What it is
Right.
recording is after, Jesus. All Jesus is talking about is the prophets, the Psalms, the Torah, the first five books. So that's where we can gain a deeper understanding of what it means to follow Christ. Again, I believe that if someone only had a New Testament, they could absolutely have a relationship with God. They could absolutely, fall in love with Jesus, and they could absolutely experience the glory of the gates of heaven. I would challenge you, though, if you have the Old Testament, you need to be also looking into it, because
Yeah.
there's a lot of real stories there, stories of broken people doing God's work, God using them, that allows us to relate to them. There's a lot of warnings, about, all of the prophets talking about idolatry and, sexual morality and all of these things that we have to take into consideration.
Yep.
So,
No argument there.
yep. All right. God gave the Israelites instructions for how to celebrate and remember Him and His goodness to them, whether times were good or bad. When are you most likely to forget God? In struggle and lack, or in abundance and ease?
Abundance and ease for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. Struggle and lack, I always hit my knees. When everything's going hunky
Yeah.
dory, that's when you're like, hey, look at me, everything's going great, and God, oh yeah, He's that other
Look
guy.
what I've done.
Yeah.
Yeah. God's my co-pilot at that point.
Right. Instead of I being the co-pilot or the passenger, more likely.
Right.
But
Yeah.
I think that's good. I had never really picked up on that. I think until I was doing this, that the feasts are always about abundance. It's about harvest. It's
Mm.
about first fruits. There's a purpose there that is about remember me in the good. There will be time to remember me in the bad, but also
Yeah.
remember me in the good.
Yeah, I like it. We could all use a little bit of reminder of that.
So we need to start celebrating the feasts.
Let's do it.
All right.
When's the next one? Passover.
Actually, it will be the Feast of Booths, which will be Passover.
So let's go camping.
Is that Feast of Booths? I'm pretty sure that's what that one is. Well, okay, so Passover and Booths, I don't remember. So yes, it'll be the week. It'll be the week of April 16th is Passover, and then I think right after that is Booths. I think it's all connected together. I'd have to go back and look at my notes to get the exact.
Yeah, I was trying to think. Cause booths is their time to remember their time in the wilderness, right? So they all
it follows right after Passover.
Tents for a week.
Yeah.
So I'll go camping for a week.
But you got to build your tent. You got to build your house.
I'm okay with that.
Okay.
As long as the weather's good.
Well, no. If you're going to follow it, you got to do it whether it's in the storms or in the sunny days too.
Well, does
just make sure you build your booth really good.
Camper count?
Okay, I guess so. You got a pre-made booth. All right, some of the Israelites
do some work to set it up.
Okay, yeah. Toss some tree limbs on top of it and call it good. Some leaves. All right, number 9. Some of the Israelites disobeyed God's commands for the Sabbath by gathering manna on that day. From their actions, what can we discern from their beliefs about God? It's kind of a no-brainer.
Obviously, they don't trust him.
Exactly. So
also, I do believe that. I believe part of it was they didn't trust, but I can put myself in their shoes a little bit. Sure. I think the curiosity would have just gotten to me. It wouldn't be necessarily that I don't believe he's going to give me enough to sustain me through the Sabbath. It would be more like, I wonder what would really happen. I would be super curious. I would be certainly tempted to go out there and just see for myself. I wouldn't perceive it as being untrusting. I would just be like, I just really got to see this for myself. And maybe that is a different definition of.
I think that's still
not trusting, kind of but
yeah. But we are from the show me state, right. So we want to prove it.
Right. I mean, somebody walks outside and tells you that the Aurora Borealis is going on. You're not going to sit there in your room and go, okay, that's cool. You're going to go outside to see it for yourself, to find out what it really looks like in real life. And sure. I could see myself being that way. And you could argue that that's not trusting, because if I really trusted, I would just accept that as being the law and accept it. But I think as humans, I just don't know that we're just built that way for the most part. Some I truly believe didn't trust in God's provision, and I think some just went, I got to see this for myself.
Yeah, I'm sure there were a few that were just like, what would happen?
Yeah.
But I would still say that's probably a lack of faith, though.
I could see that.
I would probably be right there with you, though, thinking, I just want to know what happens.
Yeah. He says it would taste nasty, so let's see what that means. I want to see how nasty it is.
I'll just hide one under my bed for a night. Yep, all the worms and stuff. So I really want to know, what does it taste like? I know it talks about how it had like a honey feel, like a sweetness, and so I just like
a honey taste, yeah.
I hope that I get to try a snack of that,
Yeah, see that's the thing I'm talking about right there. is I don't distrust that it tasted like honey, but I would like to taste it myself,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
That's the kind of thing I'm talking about for going out there to pick some up on the Sabbath just to see. But I doubt very seriously that the majority of them were thinking about science or learning things they probably
Right.
didn't trust. Just
Yeah.
like every other story there that indicates they just couldn't trust. They were pretty good at not trusting, just like the rest of us.
Very much so. So the last thing is going to be kind of hard for
Okay.
us since it was so long ago since we read this. What
Okay.
is your favorite thing you read about God's character in your God shots from this week?
I I got to go with his patience.
Yeah. I
He
gotta
just
think. I gotta go
he
with his long planning.
yeah. Yeah, both of those are good. I mean, he was way more patient with the Israelites than I would have ever been.
Yeah. I would have dropped the proverbial piano on them several times already.
I'm like, okay, if you guys aren't gonna hang with me, good luck. See ya.
Mhm.
Go back to Egypt. But that was not his plan, and that is not his character.
Nope. So we are at 56 minutes, is what my clock says.
Yep.
Do we go on or do we look for another night to do the next lesson?
Yeah. Let's look for another night because I got to start getting ready for bed. I'm tired. I'm worn out. Everybody else got to stay home today, and Daddy had to go work, so I snuffled a little bit of snow and put a lot of salt out.
Yeah.
And I drove and did some donuts in the snow, so
Nice.
that made me really tired too.
Yeah, that'll do it. So,
Okay, well, I may need to go out and figure out how to edit this now that we've done it. This is our first time doing this remotely, so I have no idea what happens when I hit stop recording here in a minute. So,
yeah.
um,
So bear with us.
hopefully people will get to see this, and hopefully it's not as awkward in the final recording as it was during some of this with all the delays. But if it was, sorry, there's 8 inches of snow on the ground and everything's been closed for 2 days and tomorrow as well. So,
Yep.
guess we'll just learn to deal with it. We'll figure something out. Well,
Be
brother, it's
flexible.
been awesome. Yep, it's been awesome. Thank you guys for watching / listening and putting up with our Israelite like stupidity at times. And I am Sean, and I am the saint.
And I'm Andy. And I'm the singer. You listen to me
We'll see you
singing.
guys next.
Have a good one.
See ya.
Bye.
Good night, brother.
Have a good one, buddy. Sleep tight.
All right, you too,
Peace.
man. See ya.
All right, bro.